brethren. You know, I really thought I'd turned that monitor on, but it appears I didn't. Please turn in your Bibles to Hebrews, the 11th chapter. We're going to finish this bad boy tonight. And just was informed about a correction on the sick list. I really need you guys to look at those and, you know, let me know what the because we're just don't know. I mean, I don't know most of those people on that list, and so you know, I was just informed one of the fellows on there had died a year ago. So, you know, we're kind of behind on that. So help me out with that. If you notice, the little baby, Asher Wright, has been added to that. He's going to have some surgery in June. It's a common surgery, but he's going to have that done, and because of the time, he's going to have some anesthesia, you know, so anytime that goes on. So they're concerned. They're up in the Gatlinburg, Sevierville area today, so remember that child and that family as they go through that. So let's start off in verse about around 13. Notice Hebrews 11 is a great hall of faith. Verse 3 is kind of a sort of a definition, but the last of this chapter is the faithful people who have done what me and you are trying to do. Just a wonderful thing. And before I go on with that, I don't know if you've kept up with the news. All I get is a flash every now and then. Hopefully it's true. But I saw where they're getting real close to a peace deal, I think, in Iran or with Iran. And that's just a great thing. But you know what I found so troubling about that is that the Persian people have had one of the greatest opportunities they will have in their lifetime to be free, to do something about it. Listen, folks, if it wasn't for the French, you know, we might be speaking the King's English. It just so happened the French and the English hated each other so bad that the French were willing to do anything they could to help us out. And if you've ever been to Yorktown battlefield, without them, we don't win that, because they just bring reinforcements in or they take all the troops and leave. So the Persian people have had the United States of America ready to jump in. They've had Israel, who obviously has enough people on the ground there that they can tell you where the generals and everything are, right? I mean, so they have definitely got an underground. And so had those people chosen to overthrow that terrible regime, they would have had the resources to do it. Now it would have cost them some of them their lives. That's the price of freedom. We're going to celebrate that here in this country tomorrow. We're going to be thankful for those young men who, I just can't even imagine what it must have been like for that door to fall down on those little PC carriers and to jump out in the ocean, all that junk on. Some of them above their head in water, you know, is all they could do just to survive the getting off the landing. I mean, the price that's been paid, that's what it takes sometimes. And so they've really missed a great opportunity in Persia to be Persians again and not extreme Islamists. Because what happens when an extreme, have y'all kept up with the news of what's happened? I think it's Pakistan, Caitlin, is that right? Afghanistan, women can't even go to a park now. Not that they have to have a man with them, can't go. They can't leave the house unless they are escorted by a man. They have no right to talk in public. After the 6th grade, they have no right to education. That is an extreme religion, and that's what they had an opportunity to climb themselves out of. It's a heartbreaking. I am so thankful for the men. You remember what our founding fathers in this country said: we need to hang together in this, or we will hang together. Now, they weren't combatants. They were signing the laws, and people, you know, but they said, let's do that. They were giving up their fortunes. They were giving up their lives, their land, everything. They would have been executed had the king have been able to get a hold of them. They were willing to sacrifice that. And then you think about the Minutemen and the militia that went out and did what they did. That's what it's just so sad. So sad that people have an opportunity to do that. I just wanted to share that with you because it just breaks my heart. And I think it says a lot about a culture. When men won't rise up and do what's right. Anyway, let's jump on into this, okay? These all died in faith. Talking about, so far we've discussed Noah, we've discussed Abraham, with the patriarchs. It says, these all died in faith, and notice, not having received the promises. Well, what promises are we talking about? Do you remember back in Genesis chapter 12, Genesis chapter 15, Genesis chapter 17? God keeps reiterating this promise to Abraham. What was it? Numerous offspring. Tells him at one point, look up at the stars of the heaven, you're going to have more children than that. Even compares it to grains of sand on the beach. You're going to have so many children. Because if you remember, Abraham's 75, and he's pretty upset that he doesn't have any children. And so Hagar says here, this needs to happen. Now Hagar doesn't say that. Sarah does. Take Hagar and have some children. And, of course, that goes over like, what's that band, Led Zeppelin? A lead balloon, right? It blows up in her face and in all their faces. And God says, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to have a child in your old age. And, of course, that's going to be the son of promise. That's going to be Isaac. And so Isaac, indeed, has Esau and Jacob. Jacob has, the 12 tribes of Israel, and then the 2.5 million people that come out of Egypt 400 and something years later. Isn't that amazing? Numerous offspring. Number 2, the land promise. And the land promise is given in detail, that it would go from the river Euphrates to the north to the river Egypt in the south, not the Nile. There's a little river far above the Nile, but at the bottom of what we would call Palestine, I suppose. That's actually called the river of Egypt. And so that was the land promise. Now and the reason I say that, the reason I'm even a little bit specific about it, is because that is one of the sugar sticks premillennialists. They'll tell you straight up, well, Israel never got the land. And so they didn't get the land, so that's still unfulfilled. And so Jesus is going to come back. He's going to whoop everybody and give them that land they were supposed to get, and he's going to reign for 1,000 years. That's just not true. You can either believe the Walvards and the false teachers of the world, or you can listen to Joshua, who says the Lord gave unto Israel all the things he said he was going to give to them, all the land. There's not one thing that the Lord promised that they didn't get a hold of in Joshua chapter 22, I believe it is. And then the third one, that through his seed, all nations of the earth would be blessed. People understood what that meant. The children of Israel understood what that meant. Why do I say that? Because the idea of the Messiah, the anointed one, they were looking for him. As we'll see, Moses here in a moment refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, rather to go through the hardship that he would go through because of Christ. Well, the word Christ there would probably be, that's great because that's what it is. But it's Messiah. They were looking for the one that was to come. Okay, even Moses. Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 3, verse 7, 22, 17, and 18. There's your different promises that were given to Abraham. So that's the promise that we were talking about. But notice, these all died in faith, the eyes of faith. They were looking for that city and maker who's not made with hands. They were looking for that city that all of us are looking for. The New Jerusalem it's referred to. And that is where we're wanting to spend our lives, where you don't have the sun or the moon or none of that stuff, because the Son, the Messiah, the Christ, and there'll be no darkness, there'll be no sickness. We read all of those descriptions, and we love it. And that's how they died. They didn't receive it here. Notice, but having seen them afar off, they didn't even get the promised land of the ones we've talked about so far, right? Abraham didn't get it. Isaac didn't get it. Jacob didn't get it, but they were looking for it. And they knew that they were going back one day to claim that, as Joseph will say, as we'll talk about Joseph here in a little bit, take my bones with you. And number 3, and confess that they were strangers and pilgrims on earth. I love this word for pilgrims. It's per epideme. And what does that mean? Well, the para there means beside, and this last part, epidemio, means to be in town to go visiting. So what were they? What are we? We're but visitors. This is not where we were created to be forever. We're spiritual beings. We're going to be alive forever. Once you were conceived, there's no turning back. You got no choice in the matter. You're going to be here. You're going to be somewhere because you are eternal. Not eternal. Eternal means you didn't have a beginning. But from now on, from the time of conception on, you will be somewhere forever. Think about that. You're either going to be in the place that we call heaven, or you're going to be in that other place that we don't even like to talk about. It's just awful. Don't want to go there. And brethren, that's why it's so important that we do what we do, that we're the pillar and the ground of truth, and we encourage people to obey the truth, not just what a lot of people are doing, right? And so that's that. Verse 14. For they that say such declare plainly that they seek a country. What about your life? What about my life, brethren? Really, I mean, that's where the brass tacks, right? Rubber meets the road and all those other figures of speech we use. What does that mean? Is that really our lives? Do they show that we're seeking after a country? That what we have here is not it? That this is not the most important thing to us? So more important than this is our spiritual relationship with the Christ and with God. Verse 15, and truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. In other words, God wasn't keeping Abraham there. He wasn't beating him up or anything, saying you can't leave. Abraham could go back. But what was he going to go back to? He was going to go back to a society that was extremely pagan. Not that the Canaanites and all that weren't in the area that they were, but remember what the plan was. Eventually, Israel was to drive out all those idolatrous nations. Unfortunately, they did not do that. But where would they go? And then it became, this is, one of the things Abraham says, go get my son a wife from my people, but don't you dare take him there. I don't want him to go there and be, led to want to stay there. Because here is where we're supposed to be. This is where God has said we're going to give us this land. And why? It was going to be their land. They were going to be separate. They were going to be a separate people, a holy people unto God. That's a type of how we are to be, brethren. They were to be separate. They couldn't even marry outside of Israel. They were not supposed to. Not that God is a racist, but he knew what would happen if they intermarried with all those pagan people. And that is, they would lead their hearts away. As a matter of fact, he was so positive of that, he knew what would happen to Solomon. God wasn't surprised by what Solomon did. Solomon wasn't supposed to multiply himself wives, but David did. So I guess he thought, like father, like son. And not only did he do it a little bit, but he took it to the next level. Bigger your harem, the more powerful you are as a king. And what did they do? They led his heart away from God. So much so that he would build pagan temples on the very mount in which the holy temple of God was built. Oh, that's why it's so important to me. It helps me deal with that, to think that Ecclesiastes is his letter of repentance. Because he realizes, man, I've done it all, I've had it all, and guess what? Or is it just like chasing the wind? All this I've built, all this I have, I'm going to leave it to my son. Who knows what he's going to do with it? He may be a fool and just waste it all. It's vanity of vanities, he would say, like trying to grab hold of the wind. It's empty. What was really important, he sums it up at the end. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all men, in that God is going to bring every work into judgment. That's what's important. So they could have went back, but they stayed. And not only that, but it became a real thing for them. When Jacob dies in Egypt, he's been very blessed. His son is like the vice president of the country, if you will. Second unto Pharaoh. And so he says, take me back. I want to be buried in the sepulcher of my fathers. Remember, Abraham bought that cave in Machpelah where Sarah was buried. And then eventually, most of your patriarchs, save Rachel, Rachel's going to be buried, you remember, in Bethlehem. However, what happens with Joseph? Here is the VP. You think about Joseph dying in Egypt. Have y'all ever been to the Arlington Cemetery? I thought it was pretty cool, that eternal flame they have there for JFK, never goes out. And I thought, well, what happens if the gas cuts off? This is how I think about things, right? But they call it the eternal flame. We know if the gas cut off, it'd go off, but they'd light it back, right? But he would have had a monument like that. This is Joseph, the great savior of Egypt, who made us so well, who made Pharaoh so wealthy. But he didn't. He says, take me with you when you leave. And that's exactly what takes place. Verse 16, but now they desire a better country. Boy, brother, isn't that it? I mean, as you mature in age, grow older, I guess. My wife would probably argue about mature. But as you grow older, certain things are more important to you than other things. And having your family close, having them obeying the gospel, having that hope, sincere hope, knowing that one day we'll all be together again, that is, that's the better country and heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Isn't that beautiful? Jesus says, I go away, and if I go away, I'll come back and what? Take you with me. He's going to prepare us a home, a place. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place. And if I go, I'm coming back to receive you unto myself. Isn't that beautiful? He's prepared for them a city. I know. What's it look like, right? Isn't that the first thing you think? I hope it's got a lot of lights, you know. Brother, my dream has always been, and I know you think this is foolish, you'll get shot over there. I know it. If I had a place, if I could just go live where I wanted to live, I'd go move somebody out up there on Missionary Ridge. You know those houses that overlook, that's always been one of my favorite views. I'm like King Kong. Remember how you remembered home, the two towers? That's me. When I come through that ridge cut, that's been where I've spent my whole life. I haven't ever lived there since I was a kid, inside the city limits, if you will. But it's always been that area. Will it have lights? Well, it's going to have the light. It's never going to get dark, right? Is the way it's described. And the descriptions given to us is the very best John can do in describing something that we really have no concept of, and that is a spiritual reality. But I think he does a pretty good job with what he talks about. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. Now we get a little more information on that, don't we? Verse 18, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Man, you're going to offer him up. What's going to happen to your lifeline there, your children? Well, Abraham's thinking. He's accounting that God was able to raise him up. God has told me that this is the son of promise, and if something, if anybody's going to make it, he is, because God's going to raise up a large amount of people unto me. So his reasoning is that when I slay my son, God's going to, but hey, guess what? God never intended for that to happen. He stays Abraham's, and so he never slays his son, but in his mind, he had already done that. He was there, everything's done, the wood's there, everything. But that wasn't God's plan. Even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure or a type. Do we trust God like that? Like Isaac and Jacob and Joseph? By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob. Now here we're going back a day, right? And Esau concerning things to come. Notice verse 21. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying. Now that would be Genesis chapter 49. Genesis 48 is where he blesses Joseph's sons. Notice, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph, that'd be Ephraim and Manasseh. Remember, Jacob extends his hand to put it on top of Ephraim's head, his right hand, and puts his left hand over. And remember, Joseph says, "Oh, not so, Father. He's the firstborn. You got your hands backwards." Remember what Jacob said? "No, son. I know what I'm doing here. The younger is going to be greater than the older." And that's contrary to how things were in those days as far as the people in the East thought. The firstborn got the double portion and all that, but Ephraim was going to be greater. And of course, when you get later on in history, you realize Ephraim is such a large tribe and so powerful in the northern kingdom that they're actually the whole kingdom. All 10 tribes of the north are referred to as Ephraim by Hosea. He will use Ephraim as a name to describe the entire kingdom. So they were very significant, very large, very powerful. But he blessed both sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning upon the top of his staff. Now people say, well, wait a minute, he was on his bed. Why did it say the top of his staff? Brethren, the difference between the words for staff and bed in the Hebrew is a punctuation. It's not something that, contextually. So don't fret over that, okay? When you read the account, you're going, but I'm pretty sure he was on his bed. He was on his bed. And there's not an error there. It's just remember the difference in the languages. Verse 22, by faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. Last part of Genesis chapter 50. Genesis is fixing to shut down, going to the book of Exodus. And what does Joseph say? Take my bones with you. And that's exactly what takes place. But it'll be a couple hundred years. from the time of Joseph until the children of Israel actually leave and go into the promised land. Notice, do we trust God enough to make wise choices? Moses and his parents did. Now you remember, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months. Why? Because like China, except I think they have lessened that rule now because they're in a real population problem. They're not going to have enough young people to take care of their old people and to work and make things because they had this law. And that is, a man and a woman can only have one child. Well, what happens if you do that for a whole generation? You lose half your population. 2 people become 1 50 years later. And you keep doing that, and you're going to government yourself right out of a place to govern because there's not going to be anybody. And so I think they have reduced that, but at one time you were forced to abort your child if you got pregnant a second time. Isn't that amazing? Brethren, that is what, when we have put sanctions on China and stuff, it hasn't been because they've just been robbing us blind as far as how much stuff they take and how much stuff they sell us. We know how one-sided that's been. It just amazes me how when you pick something up, made in China, everything's made in China. And I'm going like, this didn't cost 3 cents to make, okay? They had to pay a lot more to ship it over here. Why can't we make rubber things you stick on a wall? Anyway, there's my little spiel for the day. What we were sanctioning them for is because they're killing their people, okay? Human rights violations, forced abortions. Have you ever heard of organ harvesting? It's real, and they practice it. And if you're rich and you want an organ, and I'm not talking about the ones made by Hammond, I'm talking about the ones made by God. You contact somebody over there in the right place, and they'll get you a liver. They'll get you a set of lungs. They'll get you whatever they want. They have prisoners who, and brethren, this is documented. Congress has been looking at this information for years, where they take people that are in prison and they take a kidney or they take a part of their lung, and you don't have any choice in the matter. It's called organ harvesting. It's big business. That is why we have been sanctioning them, because that's not, you want to talk about human rights violations, that's about as much as you can get when you start cutting people's body parts off and selling them, or you tell them they have to kill their children. It's awful. Well, notice Moses' parents were in a law that said you had to kill all your baby boys. What do? They don't do that. They say no. Because they saw he was a proper child. Some of your translations will have beautiful child. What's that mean? He had 10 fingers, 10 toes, looked healthy, was a good-looking kid. And they're like, man, we're not about to do that to this child. And they were not afraid of the King's commandment. Hey, whatever happens, happens. Boy, you have to appreciate some people. I mean, I know we're having Memorial Day tomorrow, but you have got to appreciate people have gone before us. And they're told to go do this thing. Well, that's impossible, but we're going to do it. We're going to do it anyway. We're going to attack this beach. We're going to put a beachhead in Europe, and we're going to run those Nazis, those fascists, the people who are just killing people because they got Down syndrome, because they're of a nationality, or they just don't like you. We're going to stop it. That old line in the sand, We're going to make this happen. But it's going to cost you your life. So be it. So be it. Some things are more important and greater than my life. Man, that's guts, isn't it? Is that not guts? When you raise your hand and you swear to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, domestic and foreign, and what does that mean? You're offering up yourself. And I did that a whole lot more willingly when I was 18 than I think I would today. Years, man, I was ready, Of course, now I think I'm probably a whole lot more prepared to do that than I was then. And don't have as many years as in front of me. Maybe we ought to put the old people in I told, after I go to the nursing home a lot, brethren, I've told my daughter when I turn 80 or whatever, if I'm out alive, I want to start testing experimental parachutes. You know what I'm saying? I want to be the guy because, man, life can be really tough. It can be really cruel. to watch your family members. I know a lot of you have been through this more than I. That don't really seem to be with it. That don't really know you. That have held you. That have been there for you, and now having trouble identifying you. My wife had to go through that with her mother. I don't want my kids. None of us do, right? Right? We don't want that. So we try to do the best that we can. Well, anyway, they see he's a proper child. They're not afraid of the king. Do what you need to do, king, but we're not going to kill this kid. By faith, Moses. Well, what does she do? She puts him, he's a good-looking kid, so what's that going to do? When Pharaoh's daughter sees that baby in that basket, she's going, man, look, that's a strapping youth right there. She looks at him, loves him, says, I'm going to take that child. Well, notice as a result of that, by faith, Moses, when he was come to years, in other words, grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Think of all the things that went with that. Think of all the privileges. Think of all the education. Think of all the land. I mean, everything that you could ever dream of. The wealth of Egypt. You're in the king's family. He refused to be called the son. Notice, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. I know you've heard a bunch of sermons on that, and rightfully so. Sin may be pleasurable in the moment, but it will catch up with you. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Brethren, there's things that we do with our bodies that they'll catch up with you. If you abuse your body with different chemicals and so forth, and you know it doesn't always happen that way. It just doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes people who've never smoked. Have you ever heard no smoke lung cancer? You know, and the person's never had a cigarette in their life. But when we say lung cancer, that's the first thing people think, cigarettes, right? How about the non-alcoholic, what do they call that with your liver? Cirrhosis. First of all, the first thing you hear is cirrhosis of the liver. We think, well, you probably shouldn't have drank. Well, you didn't ever drink. But we do know that cirrhosis of the liver is a whole lot more probable for someone who spends a life killing it with alcohol. It's seasonal. It's seasonal. Homosexuality, seasonal. Gets to a point in time where the lust wears off, and then you're stuck with the fact that two men usually just don't get along that well, or two women. Usually doesn't take that long. Verse 26, esteeming the reproach of Christ. Now, you see that word Christ, think Messiah. Okay, think Messiah, because that's what Jesus was. That's what the Christ means. It means Messiah in Hebrew. Greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. What? He could have been so rich, so powerful, and yet he says, what I have ahead of me, by being faithful to God and going to heaven, will far outweigh anything that I could have. Isn't that something? Isn't that how we should think about that? Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a motivator? Absolutely so. Verse 27, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Notice that play there. Seeing him who can't be seen. Brethren, that's our faith. Faith, if you can see it, it's not by faith. We can't see heaven, can't see Jesus. I still, those words of Jesus are so powerful when he's talking to Thomas. Jesus shows up, Thomas is like, you mean they weren't pulling my leg? Of course they weren't. And Jesus says, come here, big boy. Here they are. Here's the scars. You wanted to thrust your hand in them, go for it. And remember Thomas said, oh, my Lord and my God. And what does Jesus say? You believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who have not seen me, but yet believe. So what do we see him with? The eyes of faith. And what is faith? Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. We see the testimonies. We see how people have been testifying about this very thing for 2,000 years, up to the point where they gave their lives, the initial bunch that came through. The men who called themselves apostles, Christ called them as apostles, they gave their lives for a lie. They didn't materially benefit from it. They gave their lives because they believed that so much they could do things to show that they indeed were from God. What is that? They had the miracles. They could do those. People said, he's telling the truth. Look, no man can do this except God be with him. And so we have their confirmed testimony, miraculous testimony, where we have it written down for us, been preserved for 2,000 years. Think about how many people have died for you to have a copy of this book right here and for us to be reading about this great bunch of folks who came before us. We're not going to get into it tonight, but boy, chapter 11, seeing we have such a great cloud of witnesses. These people went, look what they did. Do you think Abraham believed God? Well, he wouldn't have left the Ur of Chaldees to go into the wilderness where he didn't know anything about it. Do you think Jacob and Esau, and they'd go into Egypt knowing that it's just amazing the things that they did. Moses forsakes being Pharaoh's daughter. Why? Because he could see God. He listened to the stories his parents would tell him. It hadn't been written yet. How do we know it hadn't been written down yet? Come on, that's not a trick question. Moses writes it. He couldn't write. Okay. If you're still awake, would you raise your hand? Okay, all right, we got a couple out there. Okay. He couldn't read about it. So what was it? They were passing this on orally, oral traditions. And then later on, when Moses has the opportunity in the wilderness, he pens this. Very thing that we're reading about right now. Verse 28. Through faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. Brethren, that happened. The Passover was for real. They were really in Egypt. There was blood involved. And that type lasted for 1,600 years till we get to Christ. And then you see the fulfillment of that type. And that's not a cunningly devised fable. There's too much evidence where people have been doing this for hundreds of years before Jesus dies. And then after Jesus dies, he institutes the Lord's Supper. And guess what? People have been doing it for hundreds of years. It's real. It's as real as the nose on my face, which I think is getting bigger with age. But anyway, sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. That was for real. It wasn't something that's made up. A lot of people believed it. A lot of people practiced it for thousands of years. Amazing. By faith they passed through the Red Sea, not on a sandbar, as some people would have you to believe. As the shallow end of the pool. They went through on a sandbar. That's funny. Poor old Pharaoh's army couldn't swim a lick because they all died on that sandbar, right? No. Red Sea opened up. What's hard to believe that when you believe that the God of heaven created all? It's not hard to believe at all, is it? Passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, which the Egyptians, are saying to do so, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. That's not even spectacular, is it? I mean, when we're talking about the God of heaven, that ain't nothing for him. Absolutely nothing. Crawls a little shimmer. I tell you what would be amazing for the walls of Jericho to fall down and for, what was her name? Rahab's place still be there and her to live. She lived on the wall. Remember that? You know, people used to have apartments, I guess you'd call them that, on the walls and so forth. She had a window. And she was going to do what? Hang that rope out the window, that scarlet thread, so they would spare her family. So the walls fall down. There's Rahab and her family. Nobody gets killed in her family. Everybody else, not so lucky, right? After 7 days, by faith the harlot, there she is. The harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. Verse 32, what shall I say more? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon. Gideon and that, boy, I tell you what, you got to appreciate that fella. He wanted to know if God was really talking to him, right? The whole, fleece wet, ground dry, the old ground wet, fleece dry. I mean, it just, the opposites. I probably said that wrong. But he wanted to know that God was with him. And boy, even up to the battle, Gideon still, And so God says, go down there. I want you to hear these guys talking. And so 2 of the enemies are down there, and one of them's talking about his dream. So what kind of dream do you have? He said, I dreamed that this, Gideon, that he wins this battle and so forth. And so Gideon hears that, and it gives him more confidence. Because you got to admit, that's a pretty wild plan going in. Going to take 300 guys with a horn and a light, and we're going to whoop this whole Midianite army. Well, that's exactly what took place, didn't it? Except it was God doing the work. And of Barak, I think it's interesting. Barak is a fellow that wouldn't go without a woman, wasn't he? Barak here, if you remember, there was a prophetess that was involved. And Barak wouldn't go without her, but he's here in the Hall of Faith. And of Samson. Now, Ken, I had to admit, Samson's one of those guys that I've just, I know Brenda just taught a class about Samson. But if you look at his life, he's not that kind of guy you'd want to have your kids grow up to be like, right? Womanizer, seemed to party late at night, you know. There's so many things about Samson, but he was a judge in Israel. Oh, that makes you feel pretty good about maybe some things, you know, certainly don't have to be perfect, because here's a guy that is not perfect. But all the things he went through, he does exactly what God wants him to do, and that many Philistines will be destroyed because of Samson. And of Jephthah, what do you think of when you think of Jephthah? I tell you, it's like David. I'm sorry, but I'm such a negative person, I guess. When I think of David, I just can't get past Bathsheba. I appreciate the sweet psalms of Israel and all that, but I've got to say, okay, yeah, that happened, but go on. With Jephthah, we think of his oath about his daughter. In my opinion, I don't think it cost her her life. I wouldn't argue that with you. But I do believe that she couldn't have children the rest of her life, and because she was dedicated to the Lord and His Word. But still, why make that? Of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets. What about them? You know, it just fails him to have the time. Who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions. Talking about Daniel. Quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight. You think about Elijah, and you think about Elisha. There we go. What'd they have? A staff and the clothes on their back. And yet the little prophet that's with Elisha, you remember, he's just scared to death. Say, Master, what are we going to do? These armies surround us. And he goes, those that are with us far outnumber them. And I know that young prophet's going to be like, well, so far I see me and you. What are you talking about? And he says, God opened his eyes, and he does. He sees the host of the Lord all around them. They were going to be just fine. Those bad guys weren't going to hurt them at all. And what did he have? Clothes on his back and a staff, perhaps, and this other fella, made strong out of weakness. Waxed valiant in fight. Turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead, raised to life again. You can't help but think of the Elisha, the lady who was kind enough to prepare a little room for him. And I love what it had in it, a bed and a candlestick. So when he came there, you know, he could read and study. And so she has a son. Remember what happens? The son dies. So Elisha goes and brings that son back. You think about the widow's son who's coming out of the town when, and I know this is talking about the Old Testament, but I just can't help but think of Jesus, you know, healing. Oh man, what a great day that must have been for that mother who was in the worst day of her life to have that child returned to her. Just women received their dead. Others were tortured, not accepting the deliverance. Had an opportunity not to be going through that. Remember Micaiah? He didn't have to go through what he went through, but he told Ahab exactly what God told him. And Micaiah, you know, Ahab says, take this man, put him in to the mayor's house, and don't give him anything but bread and water till I come back. You know, and water, they called it the water of affliction, bread of affliction, because in other words, it was not hardly enough to even survive. And what does he say? If you come back, then what I've said isn't true. What did he do? He could have got out. He didn't have to do that, but he did. Why is that? That they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings. Yea, moreover of bonds and imprisonment. Can't help but think of the old. They were stoned. Tradition has it Jeremiah lost his life in Egypt as a result of stoning. They were sawn asunder. Tradition, once again, says that Isaiah would die this very way. Were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins. Can't help but to think about Elijah there, right? Being destitute, afflicted, and tormented. Elijah, here the great prophet, he was going through a bad day. He went through a serious case of depression when he had to, remember, he fled for his life. Jezebel said, you know, tomorrow at this time, you're going to be just like those prophets of Baal you had killed. So he leaves. And he, remember what he tells God, just let me die. I've had no effect whatsoever. Just let me die. Remember what God tells him? Well, Elijah, get up. Get up. I've got 7,000 people in this northern kingdom who've never bent the knee to Baal. Besides, I got things you need to do. You need to go anoint this king. You need to appoint a successor. So get up. Brethren, that's us. Sometimes, man, life stinks. And that's the way it's designed, by the way. You know, this life is tough by design. Everybody's. All of us go through things that are what we would classify as not good. That's part of this life. That's part of maturing. That's part of growing. That's part of getting stronger, believe it or not. And so, all of us going through that, it's easy sometimes to find ourselves being depressed. That's the only sermon I have, I think, on depression. So I think it says it all. A lot of times when we're depressed, what do we need to do? Quit worrying about ourselves, going about the Lord's business. Get up and go. Get up and make something happen. Yes, it's okay to have a pity party every now and then, but don't spend days on it. Don't spend weeks on it. You know, it's okay to not feel great sometimes. That's part of who you are. But very quickly, get over that, because it can keep getting worse and worse, and then you'll find yourself in where you may need help that, you know, some of us, like a preacher, can't give. Sometimes it gets that bad that you need folks who have dealt with that a lot. So get up. Get up, stay busy. Verse 38, parenthetical expression, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and in caves of the earth, and these all, having obtained a good report through faith. What did they do? These were good people, and they stayed true. Did they make mistakes? Boy, you know, you bring up Samson, you bring up Abraham, you bring up David. Bless their hearts. You know, my name and your name can be on there too, because we've got things in our life. If they were just out there, you know, David, it's out there. Samson is out there. You know, these men, it's written down for, you know, for everybody knows what David did. Everybody knows what Peter did. Everybody knows what happened with Job. And aren't we thankful for those examples? Because it shows that when I mess up, there's hope. There's real hope if I'll turn to the one that has the ability to forgive and humble myself through repentance. Obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. They were working for it, but they didn't get the promised land. It's like me and you won't get it in this life. Now, our lives, we may, well, I shouldn't. If the Lord were to turn right now, we would start receiving, we'd get the promise, but we'd be changed. And for some reason, I just don't think the Lord's going to come in my lifetime. I probably ought to rethink that, because I think maybe, I heard the preacher say the other day, I think me and Ken were together, that he thought the Lord was going to return in his lifetime. And I thought, well, I haven't thought like that, but maybe that would help you live a little better, maybe, you know. I think the Lord could return at any time. But you know, one of the reasons I don't think he's going to do it in my lifetime, I've just never thought I was worthy to be a part of something like that, you know. I figure I'm going to do like everybody else has done and go sleep, you know, put my body to rest somewhere, and I'll go to paradise and go through that way. I guess I've always just thought, you know, I'm not going to get the door prize, you know. Maybe that's not the way to look at that. Receive, either way, you're going to get it, right? Receive not the promise. Verse 40, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. In other words, we didn't see them get the fulfillment of what they got, but we see what they went through and what they were looking for, and we can follow that same example. So, what about you? What about me? Do you have faith? Do I have faith? But I think something that's very much missing from this list. Very much missing from this list. Who does it start off with? Doesn't start off with Adam, the first man, does it? And the Lord God called unto Adam. He said unto him, where art thou? Where are you, Adam? You think about this list. Where is Adam? He's not in the hall of faith. Why is that? I think we all have a pretty good idea of why Adam didn't make this list. Pretty tough, right? Adam answers that question and says, Lord, I was afraid when I heard you. You know, brethren, fear can be a powerful motivator. When I first wanted to be saved, I was very young, but I still knew I didn't want to go to hell. You know, I was all over that. Still don't. Still a powerful motivator for me. But as I've gotten older, it's a whole lot more about going to heaven. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to go to hell, but I sure want to go to heaven. When the Lord speaks to you, and how does the Lord speak to you? He's not going to sit at the end of your bed one night and in a big, aura with a halo on his head tell you, hey, it's about time you obeyed the gospel. What are you doing? That's not how it works. The Lord speaks to you right here through his word. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the church. Don't be afraid when you hear repent and be baptized, don't be afraid of that. That's God talking to you, saying, this is what you need to do. Don't be afraid when you hear, be thou faithful unto death, and I'll give thee the crown of life. If you're not faithful, then okay, be fearful, because that's something to be afraid of. Live your life in such a way that when God speaks to you, you don't have to do like Adam and run over and hide somewhere. Most of the time when we wonder about our salvation, it's because we know there's things in our life that we should let go. Right? We know there's problems. I need to let them go. You might say, well, I'm working on it. Let it go. Work on it harder. Be better. You might say, well, I stumble. We all do. But that habitual thing, the sin unto death, I believe is what John would refer to that, where it's just something you can't get on the other side of or won't get over on the side of because you hold it so dear. Let it go. Don't be like Adam. I heard you, Lord, and I was afraid because I was naked. If you're here and we can help you in any way, we encourage you to come. As together we stand and sing.